Valentine's Day, a day of love, romance, champagne toasts, surprise proposals. But for 38-year-old Dr. Amie Harwick, the night was meant to be fun, carefree, and a celebration of sisterhood, a Galentine's night out with her closest friends. She was dressed up in a pale pink velvet mini dress, her signature winged eyeliner on point, beaded cross necklaces draped around her neck. The night was filled with laughter, burlesque performances, clinking glasses, and selfies, memories frozen in time. But just hours later, Amie wouldn't be celebrating love. She would be fighting for her life. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 47 of the Darklivity podcast. I'm your host, Kimbyrleigha, and I'm here with my co-host, my best friend, my Valentine, Jonathan.
Hi. Darklivity is the dark downward slope into the degradation of the human mind and the consequences that such darkness brings to light.
Maybe you've already noticed that I put out a version of Amie's story on my main YouTube channel. Maybe you haven't noticed, but it's true. I'm doing the very same case on both channels. Why are we doing this? Well, there is so much to this case that I wanted to present different aspects into separate videos. Plus, this is part of our new series we're doing here on Darklivity, where we actually go on location to where these cases took place to give you a better point of view of what these locations look like. If you like that kind of thing, great. If not, it's okay because you're still going to get the whole story. That is just a bonus. And you're getting a bonus because everyone that's watching can see me, but they do not have the bonus of smelling my new perfume. And I remember that you used to say that one of my qualities, my good qualities, is that I smelled really good.
She always smells really good.
And the reason I smell good is I'm obsessed with perfume. I collect it. I have to try new scents all the time. But we both have our signature scents too. But we found them because of Scentbird. Now, I've told you about Scentbird before, and they're kindly supporting this channel and sponsoring today's video. If you love trying new fragrances, but you hate committing to a full-size bottle before knowing if you like it or it's the right one, Scentbird is perfect for you. And it's great for anyone, guys or girls. They've got all kinds of scents, and I even got Jon hooked on it.
It's true. Your first month is just $8, and you get to explore high-end scents without the expensive price tag.
It's great whether you already have a collection like I do, or you're just starting to build your own or find the scent that truly just suits you. Scentbird lets you test out a variety of brands, from luxury staples like Prada and Versace to hidden gems like Parfums de Marly, which I love the rose one, and I think it's called Delena La Rosée. It's really, really good.
Their quiz helps match you with scents that fit your preference, so you can experiment and maybe even discover your new favorite fragrance.
He found two great scents with Scentbird. There's one he wears all the time. It's called Give Me the Night by Derek Lam, and I think it's unisex, or it even could be for women, but it doesn't matter because it smells so good. Plus, their sleek, travel-friendly packaging makes it easy to take your scent wherever you go. I have my collection in my closet, and then I take one that I want on the go, I pop it into the case, and it doesn't leak in my bag. Every time I get my new scents, they come with this little info sheet and I spray the scent on there. And then I make Jon smell each one and tell me which one he likes the best.
Every month, new scents come in, so she sprays them on the thing and she has me guess which one each scents are.
Oh yeah, I also make him try to guess which ones match the names. I like doing that a lot. My favorites this month were Milk by Commodity, the Expressive one, which I can only describe as musky cotton, almost like musky linen. It's fresh, but also what I would call professional. Like I'd wear it to a business meeting, and that's what I have on right now. And it's actually unisex as well. And the top notes are warm marshmallow and tonka bean. And the other one I really liked, especially when I paired it with the orange atomizer, it's called Catch Feelings by 5 Cents, and it's fruity and woody and warm. It's great for any time, maybe a date night. The top notes are lychee and ruby grapefruit.
So if you're interested in trying Scentbird, scan the QR code on the screen or use the link below in the description.
And with our coupon code Darklivity, you'll get 55% off at Scentbird. Plus, you'll get free delivery to your door and a free case. You get the product for half the price. That's only $8, like Jon said, and that is a steal. And once again, thank you so much to Scentbird for supporting our channel. Now let's get into the case. So who was Dr. Amie Harwick? Because when this case first broke, the titles that I saw online only highlighted one part of who this woman was. Sure, she was this gorgeous Hollywood sex therapist, and that's what news media and articles called her. And yes, she used to be engaged to actor and comedian Drew Carey, but already that just leaves way too much out. It's easy to choose those labels for the headlines, and it's true to the outside world. Amie Harwick had it all. She was brilliant, ambitious, and fiercely independent. A woman who had dedicated her life to helping others escape toxic relationships. A licensed therapist, author, and public speaker. Amie was an expert in trauma, relationships, and mental health. Her work focused on empowering women, particularly those in vulnerable industries, giving them a voice in a world that often tried to silence them. But Amie wasn't just a therapist. That was just one of her passions and professions. Amie had an infectious energy, an eclectic personality, and a love for the unusual. She was just as comfortable at high-profile speaking events as she was at a rock concert decked out in fishnets, combat boots, and winged eyeliner. She had two sides to her, a vintage, glamorous pin-up aesthetic, always styled to perfection, and a wild alternative side, screaming in the mosh pits at concerts, dyeing her hair every color of the rainbow, and pushing boundaries. And she did all of this while shattering stereotypes. Because at her core, Amie was deeply compassionate, intelligent, and driven. But how did she get there? Let's go deeper to know who Amie was before the tragedy and what shaped her into the woman she became.
Amie Nicole Harwick was born on May 20th, 1981 in Sellersville, Pennsylvania, but her story really started when she was just about 11 months old. She had been in foster care until Tom and Penny Harwick met her, and it was love at first sight. They adopted her right away and brought her home to Lansdale, Pennsylvania, a close-knit commuter town with that classic small-town charm. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, the schools were great, the neighborhoods were family-friendly, and the sense of community was strong. People ran into familiar faces at the grocery store, came together for town festivals, and never quite left their childhood behind. Amie's parents had no way of knowing that their tiny baby with big brown eyes and a head full of curls would grow into a woman who would change lives. As she got older, her wild curls darkened and her curiosity only grew. And then, when she was 4, her world changed. Her parents adopted a baby boy named Chris.
And Amie was a little skeptical. She took it in stride, though, and asked in all seriousness, when is he going back? But little did she know, Chris, her brother, would become one of her fiercest allies, a relationship built on an unbreakable sibling loyalty.
From a young age, Amie was different. She stood out. She was endlessly curious, always questioning and always analyzing. Psychology and human behavior fascinated her. She wanted to understand what made people tick. She didn't care about fitting in. She cared about figuring people out.
She was obsessed with human behavior, like I think you and I are too. She was always questioning, always analyzing, and one of her favorite books was called The Primal Wound. It explored attachment issues in adopted children. And by the time she hit her teenage years, Amie had fully embraced her uniqueness, and she was unafraid to stand out. I confess some of this in the video that I did on my main channel, but one of the reasons this case took me so long to talk about was because I found myself saying me too so many times when I was learning about Amie. I could truly relate so much to her, unlike any other victim that I've ever talked about. And sometimes on my channel, people would rudely comment that I should stop relating to people that I talk about, but we're human. And as humans, we're meant to connect. And it's not creepy. I think we need more human connection. And yes, Amie is no longer with us. But I think it's actually a beautiful thing when we can see ourselves in other people and remember them because they meant something to us. And that's why I do these cases, to remember people like Amie, to connect with them and to honor their memory. So pardon me if I do that. I try not to, but I love when you tell me that you relate to these cases in the comments. So let me know if any of our cases here on this channel or mine stuck out to you, because you could relate so much, and don't stop that.
Amie wasn't just intelligent, she had style. One day, she'd be in baggy t-shirts, sneakers, and ripped jeans. Then the next, leopard print, fishnets, banties, and combat boots. She gravitated towards the alternative crowd, finding her place in punk, goth, and riot girl culture. She was obsessed with Tori Amos, Depeche Mode, and Marilyn Manson. But she also loved the color orange and had a quirky, playful side. She worked part-time jobs at the local mall, from Bavarian Pretzel to Wet Seal, and she worked at Wet Seal just to fund her ever-evolving wardrobe.
I used to love Wet Seal growing up. I mean, that really kind of dates me, but I'm sure a lot of you can relate.
And everything about Amie radiated independence.
Amie wasn't just rebellious, she was also deeply passionate. In 10th grade, her friend Sharon Little was grieving the death of a loved one, and Amie found her crying in the school bathroom. And without hesitation, she wrapped her in a hug, she listened to her, and she stayed by her side. And from that day on, they were inseparable. Amie had a rare ability to make people feel safe, like their pain mattered, and like they were not alone. It was a gift, and it would shape her entire life. And by the time she graduated from North Penn High School in 1999, she was ready to take on the world. Lansdale was home, but she always felt like she was meant for something bigger.
And it all started with a drummer. At a local rock concert, Amie met Tommy Decker, a musician from Los Angeles. Immediately, sparks flew, and soon they were in a long-distance relationship. But it wasn't long before Amie made a bold decision. She was moving to LA. Her parents were hesitant. Los Angeles is a world away from Lansdale. But they knew Amie. Once she set her mind to something, there was no stopping her. She wasn't just moving for love. She was moving for freedom, her experience, and for herself. In 2001, at just 20 years old, she packed her bags and never looked back. Amie and Tommy got married, but the relationship only lasted 3 years. She quickly realized that surviving in LA meant hustling. She needed a way to pay for school, so she stumbled into modeling. So Amie was reinventing herself as Amie Nicole. She became a striking alternative model with a glamorous pinup look and edgy style. She landed gigs with Stop Staring Clothing, Coffin Case, and AMI Clubwear, and many more. She performed as a fire eater and stilt walker at elite events. She worked as a go-go dancer at clubs and parties and fully embracing the nightlife. She even dabbled in more risque modeling just to try it out. She did whatever it took to survive, and she thrived.
And as someone who made that same move, although I was 10 years older than Amie when I did it, I can attest to it being very hard to survive here. And I had to also do a lot of random jobs off Craigslist to make ends meet, even with a law degree. It was not easy to get hired here. And it's not easy to survive here. I mean, you're from here, Jon. And I mean, you've done a lot of hustling, and you've even been in the band life as well.
Oh yeah. There's a term in entertainment. It takes 10 years to get in and 10 years to get out.
Oh, wow. I mean, you were like in an actual band, like professionally
signed
traveling
band,
around.
yeah.
To Amie's surprise and delight, the work came in steadily and allowed her to make a living while she was studying.
Amie wasn't your typical college student working as a server or delivering pizzas. She made appearances in TV and film, even landing gigs for Entourage and The Fast and the Furious. She bartended, but also used her performance talents to make money at parties and clubs. Her outgoing nature and genuine curiosity about people opened doors to high-profile Hollywood events, including gigs at the Playboy Mansion, where she met people from all walks of life. One thing she couldn't stand, though, was narcissistic, shallow, and inconsiderate people. She was always focused on self-improvement and personal growth. She was drawn to those who had a social conscience and wanted to give back.
Yeah, well, I know there's a lot of shallow people in LA.
Sure is.
So she probably realized coming from the East Coast that this was a world away, like they said, from where she came from in a small town.
Everybody's out for themselves here.
Exactly.
In 2006, she graduated from California Polytechnic State University in Pomona with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology.
By this time, Amie developed a sophisticated, glamorous, and feminine personal style. Her vintage pinup aesthetic from the 1940s to 60s era was always evident in her trademark long, glossy black hair, and of course, she was rarely seen without some combination of her winged eyeliner and fire engine red lipstick. But she also liked to change it up by embracing a bit of a rocker chick look, I would say. You can see it from her hundreds of pictures and videos that she was incredibly photogenic and at home in front of the camera. But photographs were important to Amie for another reason. Whenever she saw friends and family, she insisted on having pictures taken of everyone. For Amie, it was a core way of preserving her memories with people so she could look back on the places she had been and the people she met and immortalize the moment. But Amie loved being behind the camera as well. She'd been taking up photography as a hobby, but also landing some paid gigs here. She really proved that you can do just about anything. It seemed there was nothing that she wouldn't try and succeed at. Working out and keeping in shape had always been important to Amie as well, and she actually became a personal trainer and a Pilates instructor. And in 2010, she released a workout video called Fit to Rock. The year after that, she completed a Master's of Arts in Clinical Psychology from Pepperdine University in Malibu.
Despite all her accomplishments and living so far from home, Amie stayed close with her family. She made it a point to travel back to Pennsylvania every year to visit both her immediate and extended family. And sometimes, the family would even fly out to LA to see her. After graduating, her career really started to take off. She landed a job as a counselor in a prison. And for the first time, she felt like she was stepping into her true calling.
But then someone tried to destroy all of that. Someone anonymously sent her boss nude photos of her from back in the day when she first got to LA and was doing some more risque photo shoots like Jon had mentioned. And this resulted in her being fired. She was being punished because someone wanted to sabotage her. And that really angers me because someone tried to do that to a student in my law school. They dug up some old, semi-unclothed pictures of this law student, sent them to their classmates, professors, as if to say she shouldn't practice law. And I'm like, why? What does that accomplish? It's not even illegal. All the while, the same people that were doing this and shaming her were sitting there with DUIs. That's actual crime. But now it is actually a crime for someone to disseminate personal material like that and try to harm someone else's reputation. But Amie's past had absolutely no bearing on her direction that she was taking in her career.
Amie was devastated, and she was beyond angry, but she wasn't the type to break under pressure. If anything, this just made her more determined. She wasn't about to let one person's spiteful actions derail her dreams. But still, she needed to talk it through with her best friend, Marcy Mendoza. She was like, what am I supposed to do? What if my past keeps following me? And Marcy, half joking, said, maybe you should go into sex therapy. At first, it was a joke, but Amie actually looked into it. And it turned out to be exactly what she was meant to do. It aligned with her passions and her lived experience in a way she hadn't expected. So she enrolled in a PhD program at the Institute for Advanced Study of Human Sexuality. But this wasn't just a career move, it was a mission. She was determined to help women in vulnerable industries like sex workers, trauma survivors, and those escaping toxic relationships. For Amie, this was more than a job, it was advocacy. By 2014, Amie had built a name for herself in the field of psychology, sex therapy, and relationship counseling. And that year, she achieved a momentous milestone in her career when she became a published author. Her book, The New Sex Bible for Women, is a progressive, empowering guide to intimacy and self-confidence. And it was launched at a fabulous party complete with a red carpet, champagne, a burlesque performance, and Amie on hand to sign her new book.
Amie was unstoppable, and there's nothing wrong, disrespectful, or shameful about sex or learning about sexuality and helping others with issues that they may be having. Last time I checked, one of the most important parts of romantic relationships was intimacy and intercourse. And sometimes people have trauma and other issues that are keeping them from enjoying intimacy with their partners and feeling safe. Amie was dedicated to helping those individuals. She regularly posted insights on her professional Facebook page, including one where she reflected and she said, quote, I was rereading a paper that I wrote for graduate school in which we had to interview someone in the later stages of life. I chose AJ, a carny magician who was the first Ronald McDonald. At the end of our interview, he left me with these parting words. The worst person that you will ever meet, you will learn something from. Personal growth comes from both positive and challenging experiences, including relationships that we choose to engage in. Have you ever felt like this in your life? End quote. Amie liked to challenge the way people think and also ask questions to her audience. So have you? Have you ever learned something from a person you didn't like, or even a terrible person that we've introduced you to in these cases, or somewhere else? A lesson, a message, a takeaway? I know I have.
Oh, absolutely. Me too. In 2015, Amie was featured in the documentary Addicted to Sexting, and she filmed an interview for a French docuseries about the connection between food and sexuality. She kept busy with speaking engagements around LA, giving lectures and seminars, and even became the new sex and love columnist for Iron Man magazine. And on top of that, she made regular TV and podcast appearances, wrote articles, and was featured in major print and online publications. And that same year, she became a licensed marriage and family therapist, getting even closer to her goal of helping as many people as she can. By 2016, when Amie earned her PhD in human sexuality, her family and friends couldn't have been more proud. Not long after, she opened her private practice in West Hollywood, and word quickly spread about her empathy, her professionalism, and deep knowledge. She became involved in several professional organizations, including the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, as well as the Psychology Honor Society at Pepperdine University. Amie was certainly making her mark.
Amie applied her therapeutic expertise by volunteering with a nonprofit group called the Pineapple Support, which subsidized mental health services to adult industry performers. And this is just one example of the stigmatized groups that Amie was passionate about providing essential mental health care. No matter what you may personally feel about that industry, those people do exist and they need guidance like everybody else. Amie normalized therapy as an essential tool for everyone to help manage their mental health and develop insight into themselves. Amie also served on the board of directors for Rock to Recovery. This is an organization working with veterans, youth, and people in treatment for addiction, trauma, and a range of mental health issues using music therapy through writing and performing. And in mid-2016, she began traveling to China and conducting workshops with professional women, lecturing on feminine empowerment and confidence. On Amie's YouTube channel, she also had a YouTube channel on top of all of this. She posted videos on a wide range of topics, including the fear of flying, which I think all of us could probably use a video on that right now. She also talked about sex positivity, the benefits of pets on mental health, and of course, relationship issues. This led to her gaining quite a following on social media across both her personal and professional accounts. Amie was passionate about helping women understand the need to establish boundaries in all aspects of life in order to feel safe and also to be heard. This included educating women about being able to recognize the dynamics of toxic, dangerous relationships where they were being mistreated and how to take the necessary steps to exit such relationships and protect themselves.
Amie's work centered on helping women heal from trauma and shame, but her impact went far beyond that. She worked with clients struggling with anxiety, depression, addiction, and even adolescents coping with trauma. Her deep understanding of multicultural issues, especially regarding displaced children, earned her a Phillips Graduate Institute Stipend Award.
It's heartbreaking that no amount of success, intelligence, or preparation could have saved her from what was coming. Because while she was building a life for herself, someone else was planning to destroy her.
And things were looking up for Amie's love life. In May of 2017, she met and began a relationship with comedian, writer, and TV star 58-year-old Drew Carey, who hosted the TV game show The Price is Right, but is most famously known for being a host on Whose Line Is It Anyway?
I used to watch that all the time with my grandparents. It was really funny.
Me too. Not my grandparents, though.
That night, it was actually Amie's birthday, and she was briefly dating Marilyn Manson, and he actually stood her up. So she went out with some friends, and Drew happened to be at the same party. They started talking, and she explained what happened. Drew was like, you need to surround yourself with people who wouldn't do that to you. You know, people that valued her. Drew asked her out on a date, and he's like, you know what? Let me take you to Disneyland. And that next week, he didn't just take Amie, he took about 10 of her friends there. Drew was captivated by Amie right away. He told Amie's friend Robert, I'm going to marry her. And on New Year's Eve, 2017, he took Amie on a romantic trip to the City of Love, Paris. And that is when Drew proposed, and Amie, of course, accepted. And when they got back to the United States, the happy couple was thrilled to announce their engagement on the Valentine's Day episode of The Price is Right. But sadly, it was almost as though they were forced to do this because they were being hounded by the press for weeks. They were trying to keep their engagement on the hush, but someone was about to give their story, to sell their story, and they wanted to be the first to make the big announcement. I feel bad when that happens to celebrities because on your own time, you should be able to discuss these things, but they are celebrities. So I understand both sides.
When you're in the public's eye, you don't have any privacy.
I know. And that's what they say, the price you pay for fame, right? Amie looks stunning on stage right next to her future husband, but it wasn't all positive.
In October of 2018, police were called to the home Amie shared with Drew after she reported trespassers outside while she was home alone. She was terrified and she didn't feel safe, and sadly, She and Drew never made it to the altar, and that following month, Amie made the tough decision to end their relationship, fearing that the increased public attention from dating Drew could put her safety at risk. They did stay close for a while after the breakup, but over time they drifted and didn't talk as often as they once did.
And that is really sad, but we know the problem of being in the public. It's something we know about, and I'm sure all of you know how social media can really hurt people, and those things are scary. Amie was experiencing a lot of negativity online. She was getting a lot of anonymous and really rude comments, which gave her genuine cause for concern, especially over her professional reputation. She didn't want to risk her career. People were so mean. They were saying things like, oh, she's a gold digger. The only reason why she would be with him since he's older is because he had money. And a lot of these things were, of course, not true. One person even said, make her sign a prenuptial agreement. She has a long history of mistreating ex-partners and suing them for all they're worth. She was even put in jail for the mistreatment of one of her own family members. And she has a fake degree from a diploma mill. End quote.
Wow.
I know. Amie kind of fell into depression after this. I mean, it wasn't the first high-profile guy in LA she had dated, so this had happened to her before. She was in relationships with Chris McGlover, Dave Navarro, and as we mentioned, even Marilyn Manson for a little while. But this was different. Amie was trying to be more serious about her career. It was really hard on her, but she wouldn't stay down for long.
Things were going great for Amie. She even started lecturing at her alma mater, Pepperdine University, in 2018. She kept a busy schedule, balancing her career with a vibrant social life, attending concerts, fashion shows, and gala events, always there to support her friends who were often involved in some way. She even founded a business networking group in LA called Foxy Feminists.
Unfortunately, the fact that Amie was photogenic, she was stylish, attractive, and had at one time dated a public figure or two meant that she was often referred to in the media as a sex therapist or as Drew Carey's ex. And this distilled down her reputation and the hard work that she had to do to get where she was. It was a very narrow, inaccurate, one-dimensional representation of who she truly was. Amie was so much more than what people read in the headlines. There were even times where potential clients would book an appointment with Amie just to get close to her and hope that they would fall in love. They weren't even there for a therapy session.
Wow. And when it comes to love, one of Amie's greatest was her cat, Marquis de Sade. The name was a clever play on words, Marquis de Sade, and he was a French writer known for his controversial works on eroticism and sexuality, while chat is a French word for cat.
I hope you're saying that right.
Chat.
You are.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, any French people, you can tell us how we're mispronouncing things in the comments.
Well, anyways, Amie adored her little feline friend so much that she even dressed him up in costumes and made his own Instagram account.
In October 2019, Amie got a roommate named Michael Herman. He was in his late 40s, and she met him through her friend and photographer, Robert Koshland. Michael moved into Amie's 1927 3-story, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, double garage home painted cream with blue Tudor-style trim. The home was situated on a quiet cul-de-sac at 2086 Mound Street in the Hollywood Hills. It had a tall wrought iron gate and brick wall covered in vines to the side of the driveway. Amie redesigned the entire interior of this home, styling it beautifully with a manner of Victorian-era oddities and curiosities, including mounted animal heads, which, by the way, she explained in an interview, were ethical taxidermy. The animals die of natural causes. They're not hunted to be mounted. She also had a bunch of crosses, ornate gold picture frames, statues, velvet upholstered furniture, and even a collection of poison bottles. Every room in the house looked different, but had a design and feel that was uniquely Amie's. She also liked true crime and all things macabre. She actually was obsessed with famous Hollywood murders like the death of Sharon Tate and the Black Dahlia. As a matter of fact, and some may find this a bit odd, but she went to auctions in Hollywood and she bid on the undergarments worn by Sharon Tate. And this was a woman that was murdered by the Manson family. Amie was the highest bidder on 2 bras that Sharon used to own, and Amie had them on display in a clear box in her walk-in closet. And also, here's the house on Google Maps. But I told you that we would be showing you where these places are. So we are driving right now up the Hollywood Hills. I think it's so different to see these places in person and also for us to give you this point of view. It'll help when we explain how everything happened and it was investigated.
Amie lived upstairs on the 3rd floor while Michael's bedroom was downstairs in the basement. She was happy with the direction her life was heading, excited about her future plans. There was so much more she wanted to do and so many people she wanted to help, but not enough time. She had no idea just how little she had left. Early in the morning on Valentine's Day of 2020, around 6:30 a.m., 38-year-old Amie was rushing around getting ready for a sunrise hike in the Hollywood Hills with her friend Cleopatra.
In honor of this special day of love, Amie wore a red sweater as a bit of fun for that day. Amie led the hike, pointing out places of interest and chatting about the history of the area and taking a few photos.
She and Cleopatra had breakfast at the Beechwood Cafe where Amie was her usual bubbly, chatty self. Life was going well, and just a month before, she had launched a weekly group therapy program through Pineapple Support. And that night, around 8 p.m., Amie was headed out with friends to a Galentine's celebration. She joined Sarah Rollins and Rebecca Jalad at the historic Globe Theater to watch a burlesque show featuring their friend, Miss Tosh. And meanwhile, back at home, her roommate Michael was in the downstairs bedroom, catching up on sleep after an intense work schedule.
Amie's long dark hair was piled on top of her head in a bun. She wore a pale pink velvet mini dress, thigh-high black leather boots, a black leather jacket, and her 2 rosary necklaces. Following the show, Miss Tosh invited Amie to join her at an after party. But it was 9 p.m., and Amie and her friends had other plans. They went to a bar called the Nomad, where they had some food, tea, and they stayed until about 12:18 a.m., having fun and taking photos.
When Amie got home around 1 a.m., she texted Robert, who had sent her a link earlier that night to a restaurant in Edinburgh. They were excitedly planning a trip to Great Britain that spring, and she told him she thought this place looked cool. At 1:02 a.m., she then messaged Sarah and Rebecca asking them to send over any photos they had taken earlier that night. And after that, she stepped inside through the bright blue door of her home.
But at just 1:11 a.m., 9 minutes after Amie's last text, 911 received a frantic call from Amie's roommate, Michael Herman. He wasn't exactly cooperating with the dispatcher. As soon as she said, 911, where's the location of your emergency? He said, someone attacked my roommate. We're at 2086 Mound Street. The dispatcher asked, do you need paramedics? And Michael was like, I don't know. I just had to run out of the house. I couldn't find my phone. I couldn't find a weapon or anything. He's yelling at the dispatcher as she's trying to make sense of the situation so that she can send the right help. So she has to ask him questions. Now she's saying, what's going on? And he's like, I don't know. I was downstairs and I heard screaming. And he's already losing his patience with this dispatcher because she kept just asking him to slow down, answer her questions. And he's like, what? As in, what questions, lady? We need help right now. Don't you understand? Now, he didn't say that verbatim, but it's what he was implying. And she even said, sir, are you ready to answer my questions? And he's like, are you serious? And I would feel the same way. He's like, okay, go ahead. She's like, did you see anything? He said, no, I heard her screaming and I heard her being strangled. And the dispatcher is like, right, well, okay, I will send out officers for screaming since you didn't see anything and you don't know if she's actually being attacked or not. And he is pleading with her. He's saying, I know she's being attacked. He even said, I heard her being thrown to the ground. And finally, the dispatcher's like, okay, we're going to send you help. She gets the location. And all the while, she's still asking, like, who is screaming? So he's still having to answer all these little questions, which he thought was a waste of precious time. I was thinking if this ever happens to me where I have to make a frantic 911 call, I might have to lie because they can figure it out once they get there. But it's like they are delaying help by all these questions. But I understand she also needs to know what kind of help do you need? Like an ambulance, a cop. It's like kind of send everybody and get here quickly.
We're at 2086 Mound Street. I don't know. I just haven't run out of the house. I couldn't find my phone. I couldn't find a weapon. I couldn't find anything.
How was the assaulted? What happened?
I don't know. I was downstairs. I heard screaming. Please get a cop here.
You have to do questions, okay? They're very important. What exactly happened?
Frustrated, he responded, I'm about to hang up on this bitch.
You're hang up on this bitch. What?
ready to answer my question, sir?
Are you? Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Did you see anything?
No.
Okay, so
No, I heard her screaming, and I heard her being...
All right, so I'm going to send out if somebody's screaming, okay? Since you didn't see anything. You don't know if she's being attacked or you're not sure.
Yes, I know she's being attacked. I heard her got thrown to the ground.
Okay, all right, so 2086 Mount Street. Is that a house
Yes.
or an apartment, sir?
It's a house.
Okay. And this is who's screaming inside?
Can't even think right now.
It really pains me to have to listen to that because honestly, it is just frustrating. It's also not the first time a 911 operator has upset a caller or even made us feel like screaming through the screen.
The dispatcher asked who was screaming, but Michael was struggling to think clearly. He did manage to say Amie Harwick, and the dispatcher pressed further, asking, "Who is she to you, sir?" Michael responded, "She's my roommate."
Amie Harwick.
I mean, who is she to you, sir?
She's my roommate.
Okay.
There were just so many hoops for him to jump through just to get help.
Then the dispatcher asked Michael to confirm, was Amie screaming for help? He said yes. Then she asked for a callback number, and this was a problem. Michael was using a stranger's cell phone.
And she's screaming for help?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and your name?
Michael Herman.
And what is your callback number, Michael?
I don't have my phone. This is somebody else's phone.
Okay, would it be okay to contact you back at this phone?
Yeah.
Right, it was someone who just happened to be walking down that street when he ran out of the house for help. So we explained this to the dispatcher and asked the owner of the phone if it would be okay if they needed to call back this number. And he said yes. Then the dispatcher asked Michael if he heard someone hitting Amie. And he said yes, something like that. And that she wasn't able to answer him when he kept yelling up to her.
All right. And so you're also hearing somebody hitting her? Is that correct?
Yes, I heard something like that, yes.
Okay.
She wouldn't answer. I was yelling up there.
Okay, so I'm just going to send out as her screaming, okay, since we don't know what is going on?
Yes.
At this point, the dispatcher reiterated that she would dispatch officers for screaming since they didn't know what was happening. The call was about to end, but before that, she asked Michael if he was black, Asian, white, or Hispanic.
All right, and where are you going to be so you can direct
I'm right up front. I'm right up front.
Are you black, white, Hispanic, or Asian so they know who to look for?
What now?
Are you black, white, Hispanic, or
White.
Okay,
White.
and what color shirt will you have on?
White.
Okay. That way they can find you, okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Michael. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I do understand this is a hectic situation. The last thing you want to do is answer questions that seem really pointless. But it was to alert the officers who to look for when they get there. Michael knew this was a serious situation, and he felt like the dispatcher was delaying help even further.
While Michael waited, he kept calling up to Amie, hoping for a response. He could see the light on in the TV room on the third floor, just across her bedroom, but there was only silence. The longer he waited, the more his worry and desperation grew. Feeling like time was dragging, he borrowed the Good Samaritan's phone once again and called 911 for the second time at 1:18 a.m.
Now, I don't know if this is the same or a different dispatcher. It sounded like the same person to me. But when she answers, he's asking, why is it taking so long for cops to get here? And she asked him to provide the address, which he did. And he's like, this is absolutely incredible, meaning he can't believe it's taking so long. Then the dispatcher was like, well, has anything changed since the last time you called? And he's like, what? And she repeats herself. And he's like, yeah, she's not answering. I'm outside her window yelling. No one's answering. You need to get cops here quickly. The dispatcher let him know again that she had sent them out and they were still on the way. I would be so upset.
Finally, 2 officers from LAPD were dispatched at 1:14 a.m. for a screaming woman. It took them a while to get there because the residence was up twists and turns in the hills.
We showed you what these roads look like. They're small, there's not much space, and they can be confusing to navigate. They took a wrong turn on the way, which didn't help.
They got there around 1:24 a.m. When they arrived, they found a frantic Michael standing outside.
Hey, sir.
Hi.
How can I help you?
My roommate was attacked. I know it. I heard it. She's screaming. She was thrown to the ground. I couldn't find my phone. I couldn't find anything.
Okay, hold on. Okay, so you have access to here?
No.
Is there anybody else inside the house?
My roommate.
Just your roommate by herself?
Yes.
You didn't check on her?
Dude, I heard screaming. I don't know if that guy had a gun or a knife. I came running I couldn't find my phone.
So is there somebody else inside?
Yes. I think there's
Okay, sir, do me a favor. Do me a favor. Calm down. Calm down. Other than your roommate, is there anybody else inside the house?
I don't know.
So you didn't see anyone? You just heard...
No, I just heard her screaming. It sounded like she got thrown to the ground. I've been calling for her through his windows. Nobody's answering, nothing.
Now, it may seem a little peculiar because he seemed a bit erratic, and he had no way to get inside. There was no keys, and he had no identification.
Right. The doors were locked from the inside, of course, and the premises was secured with a wrought iron gate and other gates, which Michael said he jumped to run to get help. But now he tells cops that they have to do the same to get back inside because he doesn't have his keys. It does seem suspicious. And there are definitely some unsavory characters here in LA. So there wasn't a way to know whether Michael was actually someone who might have done something, if he was a criminal, if he was having like a mental break. He even had blood on him.
I'd imagine that most criminals wouldn't stick around, though.
Yeah, but still, they were wondering what was going on, and that's when he mentioned, I have blood on me because I hurt myself scaling the gate. He's trying to explain why he can't get back inside, and he's more and more concerned with them just checking on Amie. He's even directing the police. He's like, jump the fence. Come on, let's go. Let's go to the back of the house where the door is open. I was kind of surprised they were just standing there. I wanted to scream, just move. Now we're going to play this for you so you understand the lack of urgency and how frantic Michael really was. At the end, he walks away because he is just so frustrated.
So you were essentially locked out?
Yes. I mean, I can hop the fence, but I mean, my keys were left in the house. I was in the middle of a sleep. I mean, I was asleep.
So why is this? Why can't we get in here?
Because it's locked. Because she came home and
Listen, sir. You need to relax a little bit so that we can get all the information, okay?
Okay.
So how are you planning on getting back in here?
I don't know. I guess hopping the fence and getting my key. I hopped the fence and I cut myself on that. I'm in the middle of sleep. I don't know how many people are in there. I don't know if he's got a weapon or what. I'm trying to knock on neighbors' doors. Nobody's answering. I don't have a phone. He was walking by and I had...
Take some deep breaths from me, all right? Relax.
We don't have a lot of time. I mean...
you left all your stuff in there, but I was supposed to get in.
Well, sir, so how are we supposed to gain entry into this place?
I guess hop the fence with me. We'll go around back. The back door's open. Let's go.
So where's your key at?
Inside, downstairs. The back door's open.
So you came out and came up this way?
Yes.
Hey, partner, we're gonna have to jump it.
Finally, the officers and Michael do jump the gate. All the while, Michael was frantic, and the officers were telling him to calm down.
Here, come on.
Hey, let's do it. You're good. You good. 6815 advises the responding unit, so we had to hop the fence. We're going to be at the rear of the location.
But to his horror, when he got over the fence, he saw his roommate and friend on the ground, lifeless. Michael couldn't believe it. He was in shock. He kept saying the F word over and over again while officers were trying to understand what the hell was going on.
Sir, come here. Relax. Take a seat.
Oh my God.
We needed to meet you.
What was going on tonight?
I've been asleep all night.
Michael said he didn't know. He said he was sleeping until he heard Amie scream. Now the officers want Michael to prove that he lives in this home.
I did feel bad for Michael. He cared about his friend, that's all. And these officers, they're like, calm down. You're making everything worse for everyone. I get it. But wow, can you imagine this is your loved one, your friend, and these officers, they may be immune, but Michael surely wasn't. It was the worst day of his life. At that point, Amie begins having what appeared to be a seizure. She was breathing, but her breaths were shallow. She seemed to be clinging to life, and every minute that I sat watching the body cam, I wanted to scream, get help. There was blood coming out of Amie's nose and mouth, and her eyes were rolled back in her head.
The officers called out to Amie, but there was no response. Realizing the severity of the situation, they drew their guns, searching for any possible perpetrator while also making sure the home was secure. And at the same time, they radioed for EMTs, knowing they had a woman in serious trouble who needed immediate medical attention. And in the chaos, they were also shouting at Michael.
I mean, rightfully so. They had no idea if he was the person that caused this, and I get it. While they waited for medical to arrive, a couple more officers were on scene. So one stayed by Amie's side while the others went inside to clear the house room by room. I did think it was odd that they made the comment that this place was really fucking weird.
Yeah, that's what it's You hold that, we'll get this. I got you.
And then, looking clear, let's. That's it. Dude, this place is fucking weird.
That's so weird place, dude. It's clear here.
I didn't find it that weird at all, but I kind of do like the darker things in life, I guess you can say. It definitely wasn't the bright and airy traditional home, and sure, it had a number of animal heads on the wall, but it really wasn't that weird. It was a nice house.
The officers stepped onto the attached balcony, shining their flashlights around. That's when they spotted something on the ground. It was a syringe with a dark brown liquid inside, lying on the right side of the balcony. One of the officers, seeing syringes before, suspected it might be black tar heroin. And right away, speculation began. Could this be self-inflicted, a drug-induced episode? Had Amie injected herself, lost control, and jumped? As they searched the home and found no one else inside, they started to believe that maybe she had taken whatever was in the syringe and maybe had some kind of breakdown and leaped off the balcony.
Yeah, that's exactly what they were thinking, because they are deducing all of this in the moment. They're taking it all in, they're looking for the evidence, and it's not every day you see a syringe like that just lying on a balcony with a woman 20 feet below lying there.
Meanwhile, firefighters had finally arrived at Amie's residence at 1:32 a.m.
They had also gotten lost. It was even harder for a fire engine to navigate in that location, therefore they were delayed. They even had to park the engine away from the home and walk up because it would not fit down the narrow road.
Once they were able to get to Amie, fire department paramedic Patrick Turner found her lying on the back patio 20 feet below her rear-facing balcony, completely still. He and his team carefully assessed her condition. They gently turned her over to continue their examination and make sure her airways were open. Blood had pooled on the ground underneath Amie's head. Her neck, collarbone, hips, and ribs appeared to be soft, like they made contact with a hard surface. Aside from the injuries she sustained from her fall, there were red marks on her neck. You can see from the first responders' body cam footage that Michael was in a deep state of shock, and at this point, he's instinctively rushing forward to help Amie. I don't think he's comprehending what he was seeing, but he was quickly forced back by law enforcement, and eventually Amie was transported to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, arriving at 2:13 a.m., but sadly, Amie died just over an hour later at 3:26 a.m.
By this time, officers were questioning Michael at the scene. When asked if Amie did drugs, he said no, not at all. She didn't even drink. She was completely sober. As law enforcement searched the home, they found Amie's open purse, jacket, and the beads from her broken rosary necklace scattered across the floor, leading from her TV room into her bedroom and even out onto the balcony. When I was watching this trial, I remember this part so clearly because as soon as they talked about rosaries, there were a ton of rude comments about Amie wearing these necklaces, which I thought was so inappropriate. I just wanted to scream and tell them that's so wrong. It's okay to dislike something, but it was like she was evil. Look at her house. It's sacrilegious. She's a witch. I mean, just like went on and on. I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things.
I mean, I like studying different religions and incorporating, meaningful ideologies into my life. And I also find rosaries to be visually appealing. And like when someone puts genuine effort into crafting, a religious symbol, I can resonate with the symbolism and I may choose to wear it.
Exactly. And we can't really judge Amie and her reasons because we don't know what they are. We have no clue what the significance was. And I saw that she had a lot of crosses on the wall of her home. She was fascinated with the darker things like many of us are when we watch true crime stories. Also, I'm sure a lot of people know this, but all across LA, especially like in little boutiques and places where I'm sure Amie shopped, these type of necklaces are very, very common. So let's not get upset and say mean things about someone that we don't even know, especially over a necklace.
Right. I may choose to wear it as a way to honor the creator or appreciate the deeper meaning behind the piece.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the case, upstairs in her bedroom, the bed was a mess. Covers all over the place, her phone was lying there, and there was blood on the door leading to the balcony. It looked like there had been a struggle, but the police on the scene didn't see any signs of anyone else being there, except for Michael, who had a few blood spots on the front of his white t-shirt. The balcony had a 3-foot wrought iron railing, so they weren't sure if Amie had been attacked, had jumped, or maybe even fallen by accident. It didn't make sense for her to be out there alone and at that time of night. And then there was the syringe full of heroin, or whatever it was. No one knew how to fit that into anything. On top of all of this, a fresh puddle of what they believed to be urine was found on the hardwood floor outside of her room.
Right. This was right in front of the bathroom between the TV room and her bedroom. And we all know the saying, you scared the poop out of me. Well, you can scare the pee out of someone too. And it is actually very common in a struggle, specifically a struggle when you are in a violent situation, you can lose control of your bladder. It's very sad to think about this, but this is just more evidence to prove that this was an attack.
It's sticky. Beads. This is urine.
There's urine, but none of that.
As the sun came up, law enforcement was still going over the scene. Downstairs in the living room, a glass panel in one of the French doors facing the front yard had been smashed. There was blood on the doors and the hardwood floors nearby. Detective Masterson was sure this was how the intruder had gotten inside. The kitchen door was open too, which made it seem like this is where they ran out. Later that morning, Michael went to the Hollywood police station to give his statement. He said he had fallen asleep earlier that evening and was later woken up by what sounded like a plate smashing. Then he heard what seemed like footsteps above his room, heading toward the kitchen. He figured Amie or her cat had knocked something over and that she was cleaning it up. And after a while, he dozed off again.
But then he was suddenly jolted awake when he heard the sound of blood-curdling screams. That's how he described them. This wasn't just a momentary shriek of someone possibly having a party, getting a little too loud. The screams were continual and unrelenting. Michael instinctively called out Amie's name, hoping with everything that it wasn't her that was screaming out. But his roommate didn't respond. Instead, Michael heard what sounded like the screams being muffled and someone being thrown to the floor. Then the screaming quickly stopped. But then he heard what sounded like someone being choked during a struggle. Michael was in a panic. What was happening to Amie and who was inside their house attacking her and why? In the darkness, Michael scrambled to find his cell phone, but he couldn't locate it. So he did the only thing he could, which was call out, "Hey, motherfucker, leave her alone," in an attempt to frighten away whoever was attacking his roommate.
Can you remember? Do you still hear screaming?
I still heard screaming when I was
still hearing screaming. Now, and when we were at the house,
because that was when I was yelling. Because when I was leaving, I yelled up there, "Hey, mother!" really loud because I wanted her to think I was coming upstairs, so maybe he'd like stop and run. You know, that
he would know that he's not in the house alone. Two of them.
Right,
yeah.
right. And I didn't know if it was like, I didn't know if it was multiple people. I just didn't know. And I just hope that would that they would make the person flee.
Michael knew he had to get help, but he had sciatica recently and didn't know if he would be able to fight off someone. He was also terrified that if he went upstairs, both he and Amie could end up dead, and then no one would know. He didn't even know whether this intruder had a gun. So in a split-second decision, he ran from the property, climbing over the fence next to the tall double front gates, which were locked. Michael injured himself in the process. The top of the pointed fence scraped across his abdomen and made him bleed. At 1:08 a.m., he ran next door, knocking to attempt to wake up the neighbors and get help, but there was no response. Michael then ran back to the street where he saw the stranger, the Good Samaritan, and managed to use their phone to dial 911 at 1:11 a.m. He hadn't seen an intruder, but he said he knew of someone that possibly wanted to harm Amie. She had a restraining order against one of her ex-boyfriends, but the order had expired. Michael didn't know who the guy was, but he said that Amie's best friend Robert knew this person.
When investigators talked to Robert around 9 a.m., he was sure he knew who had done this to Amie. He didn't have to guess, he was convinced. Amie had been terrified of this man. He was 41-year-old Gareth Pursehouse.
We didn't mention Gareth when we were telling you about Amie's background because he wasn't a recent boyfriend. He and Amie had met back in 2008 when she was 28 years old and he was only 30. Amie had a bachelor's degree by this stage in her life, but she was still dancing and modeling to pay her way through school for her master's. And Gareth was working as a photographer who also had a background in software development and engineering. Their paths kept crossing at events where they were both working. At the time, Gareth and his friend Rudy were both working in an event where they met Amie and became friends with her. As Amie and Gareth talked more and more, she started to take a liking to him. He seemed charming and gregarious and down to earth with an endearing, goofy side. He even dreamed of one day making it big as a comedian. He wasn't the musician types that Amie usually dated, and he had more of a conventionally attractive look about him. He was clean cut. He was serious about taking care of his body, and so was Amie. It seemed like they had the same goals and dreams. And after 2 years of casually hanging out and seeing one another more and more, they became official around 2010. Gareth was really taken by Amie and took a bunch of photos of her any opportunity he got. They seemed like a good match, sharing a love for photography and being in front of the camera.
Gareth never liked being away from Amie for too long, and at first she was flattered by how intensely interested he was in her life. One of Amie's close friends believed that deep down, her awareness of being adopted had stirred some abandonment issues, even though she grew up in a loving home. That friend thought Gareth gave Amie a sense of emotional security she hadn't experienced in any past relationship. Eventually, the two moved in together in an apartment complex in Sherman Oaks.
But things started to get a little too intense. Amie had always had a lot of guy friends. Even Rudy, the guy who met her and Gareth at the same time, was a mutual friend of both of them. But there were many other male friends and acquaintances that hung around Amie, especially at parties and events. And when Gareth would be with Amie, he wouldn't just hold hands with her to make it apparent that they were a couple. He would have full-on make-out sessions. He would grab her and pull her aside and grope her, kind of making sure that people knew she was his. And I think it's completely okay to make sure people around you are aware you're a couple. But then there is this boundary that can be crossed. And this was inappropriate. It made Amie feel uncomfortable, which is the most important part. If you know that your partner is feeling uncomfortable, that's something you should discuss. And it should be explored more in your relationship. But Gareth didn't want to hear it. And over time, things got worse.
Gareth's behavior turned violent. His jealousy and need for control would send him into fits of rage. In police reports Amie filed, she included photos of injuries he had caused. Around April of 2011, she reported that Gareth had forced her to the ground, covered her mouth to silence her screams, and kicked her.
She wrote, quote, "He has suffocated me, punched me, slammed my head on the ground, kicked me, dropped me to the ground with force, restrained me, and punched me with a closed fist. This has resulted in bruises, inability to walk, bleeding, broken blood vessels around my face, whiplash, and sore neck and back," end quote.
In June of 2011, Amie applied for a restraining order. She specifically requested that Gareth be required to participate in a 52-week batterer intervention program, writing, "He told me he hit me because I made him so mad. He refused to get help while in the relationship."
And that same month, as the couple were driving along the freeway, they got into another argument, and Gareth pushed Amie out of the vehicle onto the side of the off-ramp and then drove off, leaving her behind. There was no question that Amie was incredibly vulnerable physically. She was only 5'4" and 118 pounds, while Gareth weighed 230 pounds and stood at 6'4" tall. Sadly, that restraining order that Amie had applied for was dismissed. That's because at a follow-up hearing, she failed to attend. But this is just one example of how the system works against the very women it should be protecting. If someone is terrified of a partner who has hurt them and caused them physical harm, of course they're not going to want to show up in court with them in the same room, even if it is a courtroom.
Amie didn't talk much about her relationship with Gareth to her parents, and looking back, they realized she probably didn't want to worry them, no matter how bad things had gotten. Her friends later noticed something strange. It was rare to see Amie and Gareth together, almost like he didn't want to share her with anyone, not even her own friends. Amie eventually confided in them about what was happening, and they urged her to leave for her own safety.
Even one of her friends made a statement that while Gareth was blandly handsome and outwardly pleasant, that he reminded them of Ted Bundy. Yikes. But honestly, I wouldn't even give him that much credit. I do understand when people believe someone is objectively good looking, but in this case, I really don't think it applies. Especially when you watch him. I've seen video clips of him trying to be funny, attempting to be a comedian. But the thing I will agree with is he has a creepy look about him.
Mm-hmm.
It was more than cringy watching him. I actually had secondhand embarrassment for him. And we are going to look at that clip later. But I was like, yikes. Like, who's going to tell him that it's not funny? Like, did anyone care enough to tell him, like, I don't think that's the career you should go in? But back to the case. On January 11th, 2012, Amie and Gareth again got into another argument in their car. And this time, the 33-year-old Gareth pulled over and tried to drag 30-year-old Amie out of the car, giving her a bloody nose in the process. He then pulled Amie's suitcases out, which were inside the car at the time, and then he threw them over his head and he ended up breaking them on the sidewalk. So she applied for another restraining order. And this time, it was granted, but on a temporary basis. After a tumultuous 18 months or so together, Amie ended the relationship in early 2012.
But Gareth refused to accept that it was over. He kept trying to contact Amie, convinced that if he could just talk to her one more time, he could make her take him back. In less than a week, he showed up at her apartment 3 separate times. The first time on March 18th, he broke into the apartment complex. Then he smashed 10 picture frames against Amie's front door before texting her, "Things will get worse."
That's actually terrifying. And I'm guessing that these were probably pictures of them together and he brought them with him and then slammed them onto the front door as a message. Well, Amie called the police. The next day, Gareth taped 4 dozen flowers to her door as an attempted apology. I have to point out that this behavior, this mistreatment followed by these loving gestures, it's a very common tactic that these types of abusers will use. The love bombing, the gifting, but it's not genuine. It's a game to them.
The day after that, he again broke into the complex and stood outside of Amie's door playing music.
A serenade that no one asked for and nobody wanted. It was just creepy.
It's like that clip in High Fidelity. Gareth became obsessed, tracking where Amie was and figuring out who she was with. He even started emailing her friends, spreading lies and awful rumors about her, trying to isolate her and turn the people closest to her against her.
Right, so that she would have no one else to run to except for him. The end of the relationship was really difficult for Amie, given she and Gareth both hung out in the same Hollywood social circles. Amie confided in one friend, saying, "I don't know what to do. I don't know how to just go about living my life with this guy going everywhere I go." That April, the existing restraining order was extended, and this time, Amie bravely attended the hearing. Gareth was ordered to stay 100 yards away from Amie at all times, and he was barred from contacting her. But he wouldn't be deterred. Knowing Amie wouldn't speak with him, he tried using their friends as a way to get through to her. But he was met with a similar response. When their mutual friend Rudy told Gareth that he needed to leave Amie alone, Gareth responded by ending his friendship with Rudy. After Rudy told Gareth, "I'm going to be choosing Amie," because they could tell there was something wrong with this man. It was overboard. Gareth wouldn't entertain anyone who didn't tell him what he wanted to hear.
Whenever Amie talked about Gareth to her friends, she called him my stalker. She was doing everything she could to move past the trauma and distress his behavior had caused her. But despite the fear she still lived with, none of her clients ever knew. She remained completely professional. Instead, she channeled her experience into her work, using her social media to talk about toxic relationships and how to escape them.
Yeah, she probably didn't want to admit that because she was trying to help other people overcome these same type of situations. So that would look like if she couldn't get a handle on her own toxic situation, how is she going to help them? But let's just be clear. Amie wasn't doing anything wrong. These are really complicated situations. In December of 2015, she wrote on her professional Facebook page, quote, "My good friend Lenora Claire has been a victim of stalking and harassment for a long time with virtually no help from law enforcement. She used her platform recently to speak out about these issues related to stalking, harassment, and cybercrimes. We need to initiate and continue a conversation about how to improve this. From mentally ill stalkers to ex-boyfriends gone wrong, I'm guessing you or someone you know have experienced an issue similar to this. I know I have. Let's help protect women and all people by improving the ways that law enforcement and the legal system handle these crimes." End quote.
Almost 4 years after breaking up with Gareth, Amie started noticing strange things happening in and around her apartment, the same one that she used to share with him. Someone was breaking in and messing with her stuff. Files on her computer were erased, photo albums went missing. Amie knew in her gut that it had to be Gareth, and she even told her parents. Her friend Robert came over to check it out and found something even weirder. Her computer wasn't just wiped, the entire processor was gone. And at the same time, she was getting hateful comments on her social media from anonymous accounts. And again, she was sure it was Gareth, but she couldn't prove it.
Can you imagine it's been 4 years now? It's been 4 years since they've broken up. She's in her career, she's helping people, and she's still getting all these messages. People are breaking in to her apartment. It is terrifying. But remember, he was in IT. He knows enough about her to probably hack her computer and has a motive to hurt her. But Amie wasn't dealing with just one person who wanted to retaliate. She actually had to take out another restraining order in 2015, and this time against a former female friend who had been consistently emailing and texting to a very uncomfortable point. And remember those photos that got Amie fired? Well, she always thought that it was Gareth. Laws criminalizing this kind of behavior have been in place in California since 2013, but it's not clear whether Amie reported this to the police at the time. We also know that so many victims don't want to come forward because they are ashamed. You're going to have to tell the police what happened, show them the photos. It can be really hard. Amie also believed Gareth was behind the comments online that appeared whenever her and Drew used to have pictures together and throughout their entire relationship. But as time passed, it seemed like Gareth's harassment was a thing of the past. So let's flash forward to 2020. It was January 16th to be exact. By this time, Amie had really carved out a space for herself in the sex therapy sector, and she was invited to speak on a panel at the Adult Industry Awards show and conference. It was called the XBiz Awards, and it was held at the JW Marriott. Amie's panel was about mental health in the adult industry, and she was joined by her friend and fellow therapist, Dr. Hernando Chavez.
Amie was standing in line with Dr. Chavez and his friend Aspen Jameson, waiting to have their photo taken on the red carpet. While Dr. Chavez went to grab drinks, Amie spotted a familiar but completely unwelcomed face in the crowd. It was, guess who?
Gareth Pursehouse.
He was working as a photographer at the event that night, and by then, the restraining order had expired.
Can you imagine? I mean, I know that she said it was hard living in LA, being part of the glitz and glam and the celebrity world without seeing him, but it was shocking and unexpected. Gareth apparently felt the same way. He was fueled by a sudden surge of anger at seeing Amie looking happy, beautiful, and in her comfort zone. Gareth launched into a tirade, and he confronted his former girlfriend in front of a large line of attendees walking the red carpet. Amie was shocked for multiple reasons. She hadn't seen Gareth in nearly a decade, and now he was cursing and making a scene in front of so many people, just yelling at her, waving his arms, and looking very unstable. Gareth broke down. He was calling Amie a hypocrite and a bitch, accusing her of breaking his heart and ruining his life. He was so overcome that he fell to the ground and he was in the fetal position. This is a grown man. Now, one thing that I need to give for context is I read that Gareth used to be a photographer for nude modeling, and there was some tension in the relationship at the time because of this. Remember, they were younger and they had many other issues, but Amie had supposedly been against adult material and people viewing such material if they wanted to be in a healthy relationship. She was only in her bachelor's degree at the time and hadn't delved into the world of human sexuality like she did after her toxic relationship with Gareth. And Gareth had actually been at this event multiple times as a photographer, so this was more of like his comfort zone. So seeing Amie at this event, sponsored by and promoting the adult arts, had Gareth calling her a hypocrite, as in, now she's okay with it when it served herself, but back then she was so against it. But it was what Amie went through that landed her where she was in 2020. A lot had changed, and it was actually none of Gareth's business. People change. That's another thing I can't stand. We don't remain the same. It's okay to change your mind, even go completely against a former belief.
Right. People do change, or at least I believe we're supposed to.
And as you get older, things that maybe you didn't see one way, you see in a different light.
Right. I feel it's the process of learning, discovering new things. You're supposed to change. Your experiences are different now than they were before.
Exactly.
Amie could feel people watching them. Mortified and not wanting to make a scene any worse, she went into autopilot. Later, she told her mom that she had switched into therapist mode, trying to calm Gareth down and de-escalate the situation without embarrassing either of them any further. For the next hour, she did her best to talk him down. His behavior scared her, but not in the way that made her think he'd lash out right then and there. She just wanted to, as she put it, neutralize the situation. Gareth sat there, sobbing, his head in his hands. He was shaking, hyperventilating, telling her he cried every day because he couldn't stop thinking about her. Then, out of nowhere, he started reciting old text messages, word for word, from their breakup.
Wait, so these were text messages from almost a decade before this?
Right, the ones that Amie had sent him during their breakup in 2012.
That's intense. That's actually really obsessive.
Right, and that really creeped Amie out. It made her realize how fixated he was on her. He told her he couldn't move on, that even watching the same TV shows or listening to the same music from their relationship would send him into a panic attack.
Oh, and I read that he was also telling her in this moment that he was trying to send her psychic messages through a Star Trek episode. And the smell of vanilla, like the scent she used to wear when they were together, he could no longer tolerate because it brought up too much pain. I mean, wow. I get it after a month maybe, or a few months of being broken up, but almost a decade?
Amie hoped that by talking to Gareth, she could make him see her as just a neutral person, not someone to obsess over. She even apologized for the restraining orders, explaining that at that time, she felt like she had no other choice. She had a lot of empathy for his pain, but she also made it clear it wasn't her responsibility.
Right. They're over. They have been completely. It is not her job to comfort him or even to talk to him. Yet she was giving her time to him in hopes that he would be able to get some closure. But one conversation of over an hour wasn't enough for Gareth. He had a taste of Amie and wanted more. Later that night, he comes right up to Amie's table, bothering her during the event. And this time, Amie told Gareth that she knew that he was the one who broke into her house and stole her photos. Gareth denied doing this, but did admit to hacking into Amie's electronic devices to monitor her and all of her activity. So he knew where she was.
Wow. This all made so much sense to Amie. She had always been hesitant to text her friends about Gareth or even mention his name in messages. She just had this gut feeling that he was somehow watching her.
And he was. That is so creepy.
And now this moment confirmed that she'd been right all along. As she tried to end the conversation, she gently but firmly told Gareth that while they weren't enemies, they also wouldn't be friends or have any contact after this night. But the unexpected run-in really shook her. Later, she talked with Dr. Chavez at length before heading home. He even offered to stay over or have her come to his place just to be safe.
But Amie knew her roommate Michael was home and felt safe enough with him there. Nevertheless, she left the event extremely concerned for her safety and knew that she needed a plan to protect herself. She wrote herself an email that night. The subject line was 2 letters, GP, for Gareth Pershouse, his initials. It said in part, quote, "Tonight I felt very scared. Gareth came up behind me and started screaming, 'You shouldn't be here. Why are you here?' He told me that no matter what he did, he couldn't stop obsessing over me. I'm pretty nervous that I'm more on his radar now. It terrifies me that he's been obsessed with me for 9 years. He thinks about me every day and throws tantrums in this way. He's malicious, highly intelligent, and focused on harming me." End quote. That's not a good combination. And she knows all of this from her own research on toxic relationships and dangerous ones.
The next day, Amie told her best friend Robert that despite Gareth's disturbing behavior at the award show, she didn't think going to police would help. He didn't explicitly threaten her, she just felt there wasn't much they could do. In one of her messages to Robert, she wrote, "Things he said were very scary. Took safety measures today, but realistically scared for my safety. My anxiety isn't bad now. I just realistically think something could happen to me." Then, the day after the award show, things escalated. Gareth had somehow found Amie's phone number online and started texting her repeatedly.
Yeah, this was creepy. He texted her saying, "I interneted your number. I recognize it now that I see it. If I'm allowed to text, ... Like asking her, like inviting her, like trying to start this conversation. And I was like, she already told them that they are not friends. She didn't give him her phone number. This was such a violation of her personal privacy, and it's stalking behavior. She didn't mean to respond either. She was on a phone call when the text came in, and it popped up, and she was moving around, and it replied 3 separate times with just the letter P. Clearly not intentional at all. And Gareth immaturely texted back, "Yes, we shall all pee. And then again, Amie's phone texted PPPOP. Then she realized what happened and texted back, oh wow, my text was left open and I'm on a call. Sorry. And she put the embarrassed emoji that's clenching its teeth together. Gareth texted back again, saying, so you're not just really into talking about pee now. Amie responded with the emoji of the girl shrugging, but Gareth continued texting. He said, quote, I'm not sure if you're ... done ... because you said, how do we finish this now last night ... but if we can meet again ... The excessive use of the ellipses, it's just telling in my opinion. I'm sure this was a hard situation to be in. This is what Amie does for a living. She helps people in these types of relationships deal with people just like this.
And it's called the Solomon's Paradox, actually.
What is that?
It's named after King Solomon, who is famously known for helping other people's lives, but was notoriously living a very messy life.
Wow, I had never even heard of that.
Yeah, it's like the paradox describes how to tend to be much more rational and clear-headed when analyzing other people's problems, but struggle to apply the same level of insight on your own because you're probably burdened by your own emotion and biases.
Also, you can't really control your specific situation, just like other people can't control theirs. So even if you can help others, it doesn't mean that you can control other people. Like, we can't. Even if we're so smart, even if we know all the right things to do, people can choose to do whatever they want. And that's the scary part.
Psychological distance. The next day at 4:26 p.m., he called and left a voicemail. He sounded really upset and emotional, practically pleading through tears. He said, I have so much I need to say. Please give me a chance to say it. Please, please.
We're going to play this for you, but as usual, it's not the best quality.
I have so much I need to say. Please give me a chance to say it. It's going to be good. Please.
Amie, most likely feeling understandably disturbed, sent Gareth a final text implementing a firm boundary.
Yeah, she tried to respond as professionally as possible, saying, I think it was really good that we were able to speak last night. I'm sure there's a lot more that you want to process and say to me, but I think that was a lot for both of us. I hope you were able to hear me last night when I said I was sorry for anything that caused you suffering, and I forgive you for the things that you did to me. I think right now it's best to have some space, and I don't mean that in a negative way. The past is sad and triggering for both of us. I think we ended our talk last night well. We can be civil from a distance, respect each other, and move forward with our lives.
And Gareth simply texts back, so you're still gone, which is exactly my nightmare and sadly what I expected.
But what did he really expect? He mistreated her in the past, she had restraining orders against him, and he shows up over and over back then. And then 9 years later, he's yelling at her in public, acting crazy. And he thinks what? That he's going to somehow get her back? That they're going to be a couple again? Gareth texted her again at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Amie didn't respond. So he texted her again at 6:45. She didn't respond to that text either. And then she blocked his number.
As Kimber said, this was Amie's job. She had experience giving advice to people in relationships and breakups, especially when dealing with exes who wouldn't take no for an answer. She was following the exact steps she'd recommend to her own clients in a similar situation. She texted Robert, Gareth keeps texting and sounds unstable. I didn't want to talk to him and wished him the best. His response was obsessive and scary. She also messaged another friend, Grace Stanley, saying, I blocked him, but because of his level of obsession, I definitely don't think I'm in the clear. I have pepper spray at the house now. My roommate is on alert. I'm upping my home security cameras.
Amie also told her parents about running into Gareth, and they discussed the need for her to perhaps consider some home and personal security measures. That same week, Amie had a handyman come over to her house and look at the French doors on the ground floor of the home because she was worried they were not very secure. She installed Nest security cameras and changed all the locks. Robert actually suggested that she get a gun for protection, but Amie didn't seem very interested in that idea. But she did start sharing her phone location with Robert so that he would always know where Amie was at all times. As she had been so many years ago, Amie was once again scared, even telling Robert, quote, if something happens to me, he did it, end quote, referring to Gareth. It's like she was predicting her own death because around 2 weeks later, Amie spoke to her parents. and asked for something that really made them anxious. She discussed her wishes for her funeral, including the type of headstone she wanted, and asked for an open casket. She was that scared that she was giving her final wishes. Then on February 10th, Amie and her friend Sarah went for a hike to the Hollywood Reserve before having dinner. Amie spoke about Gareth's behavior at the award show, telling Sarah she was scared that he would harm her or even get close to one of her clients to get to her and even maybe harm them as well. It was a lot to think about.
But now let's jump back to the investigation, specifically the hours right after Amie's death. On the afternoon of February 15th, just 13 hours after she passed away, investigators showed up at Gareth's house in Playa del Rey. We're actually driving up there now so you can see the area. It's a totally different side of Los Angeles, not in the city like Hollywood, but still part of LA County. Gareth lived closer to the beach on a hill, though not as big or expensive as the Hollywood Hills. His address was 8148 Cabora Drive, about an hour away from Amie's place. When police showed up, Gareth was about to drive his date Angeline home. She'd been at his place since 1:40 p.m. that day. They had met on Tinder a few weeks before Valentine's Day and had actually gone on a few dates. When she first got to his place that day, she noticed he had a nasty black eye and several red scratches on his face and neck, each about half an inch long. When she asked Gareth about it, he told her he gave himself a black eye while shaving.
Who manages to give themselves a black eye while shaving? I mean, I don't have much experience shaving my face, but I've never seen someone shave near their eye.
I have had my fair share of mishaps while shaving, but I've never aggressively uppercutted my eye while shaving.
It's very peculiar.
Gareth didn't try to hide the fact that he knew Amie. He openly told the police that he had dated her nearly a decade earlier. But when it came to his whereabouts the night before, he claimed that he had been home the whole time and hadn't gone anywhere. And as for the black eye, his story suddenly changed. Now, he said he got it during home renovation projects. Detective Masterson wasn't buying any of it. Gareth was arrested on suspicion of murder with bail set at $2 million. When they took his booking photos, things only got more suspicious. He had what looked like a bite mark on his bicep, along with bruises and scratches on his knees.
We're going to be putting these up on the screen, but to spare you from seeing him in his underwear, I'm going to be zooming in on the specific areas. Trust me, it's for your own good. At Amie's autopsy on February 16th, conducted by Dr. Scott Lucy, she was found to have lacerations and wounds to her face and ears, consistent with being struck. She had defensive wounds, including contusions and abrasions on her hands, arms, and shoulders. Her knuckles were cracked and bruised. Her forearm was cut. There were contusions on her neck, including a strap muscle hemorrhage, suggesting evidence of manual strangulation, likely prior to her fall. Her pelvis was shattered, her right scapula was fractured, and her internal organs, including her liver, kidneys, and brain, were severely injured as a result of the impact with the ground. I mentioned it was a fall, but that was questionable, and we're going to get into this. But her cause of death was blunt force trauma to her head and torso from hitting the ground.
Surprisingly, just 2 days later, Gareth was released on bail.
Yeah, and you only have to come up with about 10% of your bail. So on $2 million, he had to post, $200,000, but you can get a loan. You can get it from a bills bondsman, and then they'll front you the money, and then you have to pay it back over time. But everyone was scared that this man was out. Amie's close friends thought that they were actually next. Her ex-boyfriend, guitarist Dave Navarro, actually called the police concerned for his own safety. Gareth apparently believed at one point that Amie had cheated on him with Dave, and that's why they broke up.
But just the next day, Gareth was rearrested on a no-bail warrant.
There are conditions to bail. You can't be near airports because obviously you would probably be fleeing. And that is where they found him, near LAX. So he was rearrested, and it made everyone feel a lot better. It would be really scary if Gareth was out there trying to get revenge and he thought that you were one of the reasons that Amie broke up with him. And that's why Dave was scared. But Dave's mother had actually been killed by an ex-boyfriend, and he's someone who advocated for DV survivors. But they hadn't even proven Gareth was responsible for Amie's death yet.
But a search of Gareth's home turned up something very interesting and possibly incriminating. In the living room, officers found a pair of Husky brand tan and black heavy-duty gloves, a pair of white and black Nike sneakers, and in the bathroom floor, a pair of dark shorts with a stripe down the side and a white drawstring. But the real kicker, in his kitchen cabinet, they found an Excel brand syringe, the same brand found at Amie's place. Even more suspicious, this one also had remnants of that mysterious brown liquid inside. They didn't know exactly what it was yet, but it was enough. By February 19th, Gareth was officially charged with first-degree murder, burglary, and the special circumstances of lying in wait, which basically means planning to kill somebody by ambushing them. If convicted, that charge alone could make him eligible for the death penalty.
Before we move forward, I have to go back to when Amie's family was notified about her death. As you can imagine, it was unbelievable. The way they found out was actually sad as well. I mean, it's always sad when parents have to get the news that their child is deceased. But Tom and Penny were actually babysitting their grandchildren at the time, so they were not home when the local police came to inform them. So the officers went to the next of kin, which was her brother's house, Chris. When they knocked, a child answered the door, and the officer asked if he could speak with her dad. Well, Penny, who is Amie and Chris's mother, she was standing behind her grandchild, and the officer looked at her and said, "We need to make a death notification. Chris's sister has been killed," not knowing that he was addressing her mother. That's sad. They felt terrible when they realized what happened, and they stayed with the family until they calmed down and got in touch with the LAPD. Chris and his wife rushed back home from their Valentine's vacation once they were notified.
The devastating news of Amie's loss sent shockwaves through her inner circle in LA, her friends, her colleagues, clients, and everyone who knew her. Even her ex-fiancé, Drew Carey, was deeply affected. Just 2 years earlier, he had proudly introduced her to the world on a Valentine's Day episode of The Price is Right as the woman he was going to marry.
So much can change in such a short amount of time. It's actually terrifying.
Just one day before her death, Amie had reached out to Drew, texting, "I know we haven't talked in a while, but I've been doing a lot of thinking about forgiveness, and I would love to get together with you and talk." And Drew responded with, "I would love to do that. I love you." And they set a date to meet after that weekend.
Drew was dating someone else by this time, and he didn't think Amie wanted to get back together from her text. He interpreted it as more of a friend reaching out, and he was delighted to hear from her. Now Amie was gone. Here was a woman in her prime with so much going for her. She was so accomplished and talented and had so much more to achieve, and her life had been snuffed out in the cruelest way. Drew was so shattered that The Price is Right actually went on hiatus while he struggled to deal with the intense and unexpected grief that had swept into his life. Despite the pain, though, Drew found it within him to issue a statement saying, quote, "Amie and I had a love that people are lucky to have once in a lifetime. She was a positive force in the world, a tireless and unapologetic champion for women, and passionate about her work as a therapist. I am overcome with grief," end quote. Amie's death was poignant for another reason. The day before Valentine's Day, she posted on her professional Instagram account. She said, quote, "Let's take time to reflect on our ideas of romantic love, how it occurs, and what it means to us. Throughout time, literature, and art, we see depictions of falling in love, complete with Cupid shooting us with his arrow, forcing us to fall into this emotion. That is a narrative that hasn't always served us well. Remember that time spent with someone, eye contact, shared experiences, mutual positive regard, and sexual connection leads to attachment and bonding. Let's remember how much control we actually have over the partners we pick and how we move forward in our romantic relationships," end quote. I found that to be very tragic, and the irony that she would be stalked and harassed and killed by an ex and that she was in a toxic relationship with. It was a topic of many of her posts and her speeches and even her help sessions.
Her close friends were heartbroken, but they were angry. Amie had taken all the right steps to protect herself from Gareth, and the system failed her. Her restraining order should have kept her safe, but the fact that they come with an expiration date only proved how flawed and ineffective they really are at protecting women.
Here in California, they have a maximum of 5 years, but in other states, you can get one for an entire lifetime.
Amie's funeral was held on February 27th in her hometown of Lansdale, Pennsylvania. The pain and heartbreak her family endured was devastating for everyone to witness.
One of her close friends even asked Amie's mom if it would be okay to do Amie's makeup and hair because she knew what Amie liked, and then her mom gave her the blessing to do that, so she prepared her for her funeral.
So many of her close friends and peers were there, along with her ex-fiancé Drew. Even then, it still didn't feel real to anyone.
Afterward, her parents tucked her in one last time into her casket. There's a reason I'm saying that. We'll get to it. They kissed her goodbye, and Amie's family requested that in lieu of flowers, any contributions to be made to Rock for recovery. They were so proud of her. And it's shocking to me. It just doesn't seem real. I don't even know her, and it doesn't seem real. She's just gone like that. But things weren't over yet. On April 16th, Gareth pleaded not guilty to all of his charges at his arraignment. As investigators looked further into the evidence around Amie's murder, they conducted extensive interviews with her neighbors and those who knew her best. They also reviewed surveillance footage, and it was clear Gareth hadn't attacked her in a moment of passion or a fit of rage. Gareth was completely obsessed with Amie and had been plotting his revenge ever since they split up about 9 years earlier. After their unexpected run-in at the awards show, Gareth's obsession was reignited to a dangerous level.
It was obvious that he had deliberately planned to break into Amie's home while she was out and wait for the right moment to attack. He brought a syringe filled with a lethal dose of not heroin, but liquid nicotine, intending to inject it right into her.
When I first heard this, I was kind of shocked. Of course, I'd heard of nicotine, but in liquid form, that was new to me. But I have been aware that you can inject it into things like vapes. But thinking about it being deadly, that just did not come to my mind. But I looked it up, and I found out that as little as 1 teaspoon of liquid nicotine can be fatal to a 26-pound child. Even liquid nicotine spilled on the skin can be poisonous within minutes. But injected, that's a whole other story. It's lethal, but it also absorbs rapidly. And though it is detectable in urine post-mortem, it could look harmless by medical examiners who aren't looking for it as a weapon for murder or death. But in this case, the syringe was sent to the FBI lab once heroin was ruled out. The needle was covered when it was found, which meant that it probably hadn't been used. The likely scenario is that Gareth was waiting until Amie fell asleep and he planned to inject her with it, hoping that her death would be ruled undetermined or even self-inflicted if he planned on leaving the syringe behind at all. Though I doubt anyone would have thought that she did this to herself. But things didn't go as planned. Clearly, she caught Gareth hiding. It seemed as though he was in her TV room, or maybe even in her bed. It was Detective Masterson's point of view, based on the evidence, that Gareth was indeed in Amie's bed. She made her bed every morning, and she was fully dressed when she was found. She wasn't in night clothes. Therefore, he thinks, after Gareth broke in, he got into Amie's bed under the covers, where he waited for her for the next 4 hours or so, until she came home. This is chilling, and I cannot imagine how paralyzed with fear Amie must have been in that moment. She arrived home to be confronted with such a terrifying sight. Masterson believes Amie arrived from her night out around 1 a.m., went upstairs, and went to sit on her bed, and she received the shock of her life upon finding Gareth inside waiting for her. Now, of course, we can't be sure, but Masterson thinks she threw her phone at him. That's why it was on the bed. But we know that Amie fought him, and a struggle ensued. She was found wearing the outfit she went out in that night, except for her leather jacket, which was on the floor in the TV room, inside out.
Right, and since her phone was by her bed, it's believed that she came upstairs, she set her things down, and may have been heading into the TV room because she heard a noise. Or maybe she was putting her jacket in the closet. Broken beads from her necklace were found around the TV room and trailing back toward her bedroom. The last of them were near her body, because the wire portion of her necklace was still hanging from her neck from the fall from the balcony. Only one charm remained on the wire. The rest were scattered upstairs as she struggled.
And it's believed that either the initial scare or the strangling happened in the hall, because when they swabbed that area, it was indeed Amie's urine that was found on the floor. She was so scared that she lost control of herself, which makes me so sad, but also very angry. This man is terrifying. He's much bigger than Amie. And if he was coming at her with that needle, I am sure she was beyond horrified. But the detectives think the syringe actually fell out of Gareth's pocket when the struggle moved to the balcony. One theory is that Amie was already rendered unconscious before Gareth decided to throw her off, and at the same time the syringe got left behind. Another theory was that he was chasing her with the syringe and she ran towards the balcony to try to scream for help, or because she had nowhere else to go and she kept fighting, so he threw her off. Amie used every ounce of energy she had to fight for her life. biting Gareth on the bicep, and likely inflicting his black eye as she resisted his attempts to overpower her. Remember, she is about 5'4", 118 pounds, and he is 6'4" at 230 pounds.
Detectives also theorized that Gareth began strangling Amie when her roommate yelled out because they don't believe Gareth was aware he was there.
One thing was clear. Gareth was there that night.
Law enforcement reviewed security footage from Amie's neighborhood on the night of her murder. At 8:51 p.m., the motion-activated cameras at her next-door neighbor's house captured someone who looked like Gareth coming up from the back of the property and up the side of the house. He was wearing gloves, black shorts, white sneakers, and a black t-shirt, a gray jacket, and a black cap. The shorts, sneakers, and gloves matched the ones found during the search of his apartment. In the footage, Gareth was also carrying some kind of bag as he used his right hand to cover the camera. The way Gareth moved out of frame suggested he was heading toward the side fence that Amie shared with her neighbor, but he hadn't approached from the front. Behind the neighbor's house was a vacant lot, making it easy for him to sneak through and reach the side fence from the rear. When he jumped the fence, he broke an arm off of one of the statues standing next to it. Gareth then made his way to the French doors, smashing the glass to break in. That was the noise Michael initially heard, but brushed off, thinking it was the cat or Amie knocking something over. In the process, Gareth cut himself, unknowingly leaving drops of blood on the hardwood floor. That blood was collected and tested, and DNA confirmed it was Gareth's. After attacking Amie, he ran downstairs out of the kitchen door and jumped over the fence, triggering the same neighbor's security camera as he fled back through the vacant lot. The attack was brutal and fast. Only 6 minutes passed between Amie sending her last text and her roommate Michael frantically knocking on their neighbor's door for help.
See, that's what I mean by how fast things can change. It's almost in the blink of an eye. That night changed from having a great time with her friends to her life ending. It's unreal, and this should not happen. She even had those cameras set up, but unfortunately, the last video sent to Amie's cell phone from her motion-activated security camera was at 6:41 p.m. on Valentine's Day. No one was seen inside the property after that, despite a spider web causing the camera to activate at some point when it was all quiet. I remember we had the same thing here at the studio. We had a spider web that would set it off all the time, and I thought it was a ghost. But apparently, from what I gathered from the trial, was that in Amie's case, she had not yet set up a paid account. She had just installed her Nest cameras. We have the same kind, and unless you have a plan, you can't do certain things. You can't rewind, you can't save, and it won't continuously record either. But it will record and save tiny clips when it senses movement. And I think they only keep them for about 30 days, and then they delete, and maybe sooner. That's unfortunate, because had Amie gotten a notification, she would have known that Gareth was inside her house. I couldn't help but feel sad seeing one of the only times the camera had captured movement, and it was of Amie's cat, waiting at the door, as if waiting for her to come home.
The detectives and prosecutors kept building their case against Gareth. The detectives went through Gareth's phone records from the weeks and days leading up to Amie's murder, and they discovered that Gareth had been texting 2 other women, not just before the attack, but even afterward. That afternoon, he had been messaging one of them, Angeline. She had asked what he was up to and why he hadn't made Valentine's Day plans with her. At 7:10 p.m., just over an hour before breaking into Amie's house, Gareth replied, "En route home, I told you, I'm busy all week." Angeline never responded.
And rightfully so. That's really weird. It's so aggressive. But what's scary is that he'd been acting like nothing was happening. Like it was just an ordinary night. Oh, I'm just on my way home. I'm busy all week. Can't hang out. To me, that's just really sickening. And I can just imagine him drawing up that syringe moments before and then sending this innocuous text message to this woman, knowing that he was on the way to harm his ex.
But what's truly chilling is that at 1:57 a.m., about 40 minutes after that 911 call, Gareth was texting another woman that he had been seeing. This time it's Natasha. He wasn't panicked or hiding. Instead, he was just laughing at a message she had sent to him earlier in the evening, one that he hadn't responded to yet.
I guess he was too busy to get back to her. And I would just want to note, this was approximately how long it would take him to drive home from Amie's that same night when traffic would be lighter. Then the next morning, he's back to texting Angeline, but he's changed his tune. At 10:59 a.m., less than 11 hours since Amie was found on her back patio clinging to life, he says, "Morning sunshine" to Angeline. She responds with hi, and he asked her what she was up to, and she explained that she had just got back from walking her dogs and was going for a ride on her bike later, since it was so gorgeous out. Then he asked her if she'd like to make her way over to his place. She arrived around 1:40 p.m. So now he has time to hang out, when he initially said he would be busy all week. I guess he needed an alibi, or he needed to make it look like things were normal, like he had this woman or two in his life. Why would he harm Amie?
Investigators also found that Gareth had deleted messages he sent to Amie before her death, along with his contact list and call log. They were still building their case when, in September of 2021, Gareth, now 43 years old, finally appeared in court for his preliminary hearing. The hearing had been repeatedly delayed, largely due to the global pandemic. He pleaded not guilty, and his defense team questioned the integrity of the crime scene evidence. They argued that there was no direct proof that he had broken in, pointing out that he wasn't on any security footage inside Amie's home. This became the foundation of a defense motion to have the case dismissed.
This must have been before the neighbor's footage was turned over, and we'll get to that soon. But there was more than enough evidence he had motive, and all Amie's friends had to do was provide statements about how scared she was, and that she even named Gareth as the person who would hurt her if she ended up dead. The case was moving forward. That March, the court denied the defense's motion for the case against Gareth to be dismissed. By this time, California Governor Gavin Newsom announced the state's death row would be dismantled by the end of 2024. So even if Gareth was convicted of first-degree murder, it was more likely that he was going to have life without parole when it came to sentencing. And as the 2-year anniversary of Amie's death loomed, her parents Tom and Penny released a statement saying, quote, "As we approach the anniversary of Amie's death, we remain thankful for the unwavering support of our extended family and friends. Many of Amie's close friends communicate with us regularly, attend court hearings, and update us on those proceedings. We are very grateful. Our hope is that 2022 will bring justice for Amie and focus on her life, her work, and her accomplishments," end quote. Finally, 45-year-old Gareth's trial began in August of 2023 at the Los Angeles County Superior Court before Judge George G. Lamelli. Gareth looked entirely different. He was no longer the tanned, fit, objectively handsome LA wannabe celebrity that he was back in 2020. Instead, he had put on a significant amount of weight. He was wearing glasses and looked as though he had aged at least 10 years. Over the next 10 days, Amie's shattered parents showed up every day to honor their daughter and see justice done. The details of Amie's last moments and her fatal injuries were graphic and distressing, but the Harwicks were committed to being there to hear everything about how their daughter fought for her life.
By this time, the blood found on the floor just inside the broken French door of Amie's home tested positive as a match to Gareth's DNA, and so was DNA found under Amie's fingernails at autopsy.
The possibility that it belonged to someone else and not Gareth was less than 1 in a septillion. That's a number followed by 24 zeros, which just blows my mind. There was no doubt that he was there inside of her home. The prosecution laid everything out in a very powerful opening statement by Victor Avila. He told the jury everything we already told you, and specifically that following the run-in at the awards show in January 2020, Gareth's thwarted attempts to reconnect with Amie, driven by obsession, he decided to kill his ex-girlfriend on Valentine's Day. That it wasn't a coincidence, but instead designed to send a message that she would never love again. She'd be dead. There was a lot of forensic evidence. The DNA, of course, Amie's blood was found on the doorknob to the balcony, which was transferred from Gareth's gloves after striking her. There was security footage, 4 ring videos from next door. 2 were what appeared to be a gloved hand being put over the camera until they reset. Now, I had no idea that this was a thing, that it blocks the motion detection and then resets. And I thought, wow, what a dumb setting, or like a dumb thing to do for a camera that's supposed to be showing you who's coming and going. I don't know if that's still a thing because this was back in 2020, but it kind of defeats the purpose. The first video was at 8:51 and 33 seconds. We're going to play it for you now. And as you can see, it was just immediately a gloved hand going right over the camera. The next one is at 8:52 and 42 seconds. This time you can see part of the side of the house and a fence between the neighbors and Amie's. someone is wearing dark-colored clothing, and they're to the left of the frame when they reach out and cover the second camera, keeping their gloved hand over the top of it until it goes black. However, the third camera gets an even better view. The camera is a little away from the stairs leading down to the back of the home. This time it shows a man matching Gareth's description, wearing a black hat, dark-colored long-sleeved black Under Armour shirt, and a dark blue-colored jacket, and dark-colored shorts with a white stripe on the side of them and a white drawstring. He's got on white shoes with white socks, and he's wearing gloves. He enters the frame on the right, making his way down the stairs and just creeping towards the camera.
It also looks like he might be holding a small black bag. He reaches out with his right hand to cover the camera, thinking he's being slick. But Gareth owned all of those clothes, including the gloves, so there's no question it was him making his way to Amie's. But there's one more piece of footage, and it's even more incriminating. Moments after she went over the balcony, the footage shows a man dropping down from the fence leading into Amie's backyard. He's wearing the same clothes and appears to drop the same bag, quickly scooping it up before running off camera in a hurry to escape. His hat is now missing, revealing his brown hair, and he's still wearing the same gloves that were later found in Gareth's living room.
I mean, it's him. It's clearly him. They've got so much evidence. There's no way to deny that man was inside Amie's home. But the defense had their own theory and argument to the jury. It didn't consist of calling any witnesses. Instead, they said Amie was to blame. Gareth's attorney, Evan Franzel, assisted by attorney Robert Bernstein-Lev, told the court that Gareth and Amie's chance encounter at the award show sent his client into a deep, debilitating depression. The only solution to this sudden onset, Gareth felt, was to merely have a talk with his ex-girlfriend. When she blocked his number, the defense claimed Gareth was compelled to go to Amie's house purely in an attempt to talk face-to-face for closure, but nothing more.
Then why would he wear gloves, cover up security cameras, and take a syringe full of nicotine if they're just going to talk?
Right. But the defense explained away the nicotine-filled syringe by claiming that Gareth had planned on taking his own life, which of course made no sense. It was argued he wanted to do it in front of Amie so she would know she caused it. And then the news would cast her as the evil therapist who pushed her ex to the limit and he took his life kind of thing. But come on. The best argument against that theory is that Gareth is still alive. Why didn't he do it? Why didn't he follow through? Why instead did Amie go off the balcony?
And like the prosecution pointed out during cross-examination, why go through all the trouble of wearing gloves and messing with security cameras if Gareth was planning to take his own life?
Exactly. He could have even done it at home and filmed it and sent it to her through email. It still would have driven the point home, right? But it was one of their best arguments, I guess. But here's what really irritated and upset me. The defense went further. During their opening statement, they proposed a theory that Amie could have climbed over the balcony and fallen in an attempt to flee. But there's more. The most outrageous defense argument relied on an undated photograph of Amie, but she was posing while sitting on what appeared to be the same balcony. In the photograph, Amie is positioned to the side, supporting herself with her hands on either side and her right foot resting on the railing. Her left foot is pointed down in the air. This was intended to convey to the jury that Amie was responsible for her own fall and that she'd been comfortable posing on railings. What was their point? There was no evidence she did this on the night in question. It also completely disregarded the evidence of Gareth's previous violent history and his actions in breaking into her home when he thought he wouldn't be caught. I said this in the video on my channel, but what if she did? What if she did think, oh my God, I have nowhere to go. I would rather jump than this monster is chasing me, inject me with this liquid. That's still not of her own will.
How would Amie have been able to get to the balcony if she'd been strangled? That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, because there was evidence she was strangled, and that alone can be fatal. And why run to the balcony instead of down the stairs if she was able to run at all? It sounded like the struggle occurred closer to the hallway when Michael heard it happen. So why run to a place you can't escape? And to top it off, Gareth's actions were not consistent with someone who was in a deep depression. Obsessive psycho, yes.
The defense threw out yet another theory, that no one really knew who started the attack. Basically, they were suggesting that Amie might have been the aggressor, acting out of fear, which kept pushing the victim-blaming narrative.
That's pretty absurd because this was her home. She had every right to attack him if he had broken in, and she certainly hadn't invited him. We know that. Any way you spin the narrative, he still broke in and she was attacked. He caused her death. I think one of the most compelling exhibits for the prosecution was a taped recording of a jail visit between Gareth and his two friends while he was in custody following his arrest. Gareth could be heard laughing as he said, "Shit's not great. I'm not getting out of here. I've seen what's coming at me and I'm not getting out. Things seem bleak. I guess I'm officially a bad boy now, right? I've always been, kind of."
Hey, oh shit, hey guys. Hey. And, yeah, so shit's not great. I'm not getting out of here.
So you say you're not getting out?
Correct.
Ever? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes. I've seen what's coming at me, and it's not good. I'm not getting out. Super fun. Yeah, things seem bleak. I guess I'm officially a bad boy now, right? I've always been kind of...
No, you won that game.
Gareth even asked his friends to try to find all the jokes he had written. And he was telling them to make a book out of them while his name was still hot so that they could make as much money as possible. There was no expression of remorse. Instead, he was just laughing. And he joked, "My name is a real big thing now." I thought that was really disgusting.
Yeah.
So gross that he was almost competing with Amie for fame. And now he felt like he'd made it. And it's all because he took her life. I mean, is that something that you would want to be infamous for, killing this amazing person? But let's listen to that now.
I also told, he probably won't do it, I told him to get all the 6,000 jokes I've written from my Google Docs. I told him to get them and then turn them into a book and sell it online as my book jokes, because I don't make money.
There you go.
Obviously, my name is a big thing right now, so if you could sell stuff as mine to weird collectors, you should be able to get more money for it. You know that's a real thing? You know that's a real thing?
Yeah.
And same thing with my car. My car isn't paid off, so hopefully I can sell that for more than it's worth. They're the same thing. Right now, actually, try to find a publisher that'll give you money ahead of time for that. Right now, you know what I mean? Just based on my name because of the media. That could be $1 million. I don't know how that shit works. But I do have a joke for you. What's the most feminine candy bar?
Huh?
Hershey's.
Well, we see how he's yeah, you got your sense of humor. You're making the best of it in there.
Remember how we told you we were going to show you that comedy clip? It's finally time. Forgive us for subjecting you to this because it's that bad. But this was actually on January 20th of 2020. So a little less than a month before Amie was attacked, and only a few days after his encounter with her at the award show. He was at a live event, and he pre-planned being one of the amateur comedians to take the stage. He looked so awkward even walking up there. He almost gets tangled in the microphone cord. But here's his first joke.
Spin around this. There we go. Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here in all the best parts of entertainment. We've got most of a band. We've got morning radio sound effects. Sometimes a full band when a toy kazoo comes from the ground, raises from the grave, takes over Tony and starts singing. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful time.
The second one hardly landed because they were shooing him off, but he begged them to stay and keep going. And we're not going to show you what he did there, but the joke definitely wasn't funny.
We're not showing you because all of his jokes were extremely inappropriate. They were all sexual in nature. And his last one was about how people would mourn individuals in the adult industry. How do we mourn their deaths? He said most entertainers' best days of their careers are in the days following their deaths, when all their memorabilia skyrockets. But he asked, what about adult stars? He's like, how are they mourned? Are guys whacking off saying she was so underappreciated in her time? And he was doing the motion of pleasuring oneself. It was just dumb and disgusting, and he looked like he was making a fool out of himself. But it's also kind of sickly ironic. Amie wasn't an adult star, but she was a model, a beautiful woman in Hollywood. His mind's just twisted.
Anyway, so I have bad news for the entertainers over there. No, okay. I have bad news for the entertainers over there. The best day of your career is going to be the days after you die, when like paintings skyrocket in price. Can I continue? Can I? It's close. It's,
Go ahead,
okay,
Gareth. Go ahead.
The paintings skyrocket in price. Redbox starts holding some movie from 1962. But what about the porn talent? What happens with them? Is it just Red Band at home singing, "She was so underappreciated in her time"?
But it was the prosecution that delivered the most powerful evidence as they wrapped up their case. All thanks to Amie's own words. In that email she wrote just hours after the award show, she made sure to document everything, knowing it was important in case something happened.
It was as though she testified to her own murder beyond the grave. Let's play it for you as the prosecutor read her words.
And she writes an email to herself. In this email, she documents what just happened with the defendant and her fears of what can happen to her at his hands. She writes, there's a date, January 17, 2020, at 3:09 a.m. Tonight, I felt very scared. I went to the award show with Fernando. When we arrived, we waited in a very long line to do the red carpet. As we were waiting, I saw Gareth walk by with a camera. Clearly, he was working. I decided to ignore him and just not looking at that direction. I thought maybe he could not notice me. I'll show you another part of this email where she states, up and shaking violently, meaning the defendant was shaking violently when he was talking to her. I was scared and felt like I needed to neutralize the situation. I don't think he was going to attack me in that moment, but this clearly showed me how obsessed he was. He told me that he thinks about me every day, and every day he cries. He told me he lost his job when we broke up because he couldn't work. He told me that no matter what he did, he couldn't stop obsessing over me. He told me that I was a cheater and a liar because he thought we were still together when I believed that we were broken up. He recited text messages that I had sent from this time frame, about 9 years ago. He recited the date, who they were to, and exactly what was said word for word. I couldn't believe it. I was very scared. He said he wasn't able to move on, but he's dated, but nobody with me. He said he thinks about me constantly. She wrote this email to herself. She didn't send it to anyone, as you will hear. At the end of the conversation, I told him my friend Hernando was waiting for me. I asked him how he would like to end this conversation. I told him that we don't have to be brutal enemies. I told him that we will not be friends and we will not be talking, but that we don't have to be enemies. I told him that I was genuinely sorry for anything that I did that was hurtful all of those years ago, and I told him that I forgave him. He asked for a hug, and I told him that was not a good idea. He started to cry. Eventually, he walked away. Fernando and I went towards the escalator to go towards the vehicle. So that's an email that she wrote to herself that's brought in for her state of mind, to show you what her state of mind was right after her interaction with the defendant.
For me, that's so telling, and I wanted to mention something. We know how compassionate Amie was. Well, we come to find out her mother had the same quality. During the trial, there was a woman who appeared to be very emotional. She was really struggling with what she was hearing. And she eventually approached Penny to express her deep, sincere condolences. And guess who it was? It was Gareth's mom. Well, Penny's heart actually went out to her. That's the kind of person Penny was. She felt the pain that this other mother was going through. She was also grieving what happened. Penny didn't blame Gareth's mother at all for what her son chose to do. But now it was the jury who had to make a choice. When it was time to deliberate, they had three options when it came to a potential guilty verdict: murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, or voluntary manslaughter.
First degree meant it was planned, and second meant it happened in the moment due to Gareth going over there to talk. And then a struggle happened, and voluntary manslaughter would be the heat of passion, like something in the moment made him overcome with so much emotion that he acted in a way that caused her death.
Right. And you think it would be easy, but deliberation went into day 2. There was a lot of evidence to consider, but I thought the prosecution was so thorough. They even had an expert make a digital replica of Amie's entire house to show it from every angle, and an expert who explained this wasn't a fall. According to science, the way that she landed showed she was dropped, that she wasn't conscious when she was lifted over that railing to her death. And finally, the notification came back. There was a verdict. Prosecutors, as well as Amie's family and friends, were incredibly anxious, unsure of how the jury was going to decide. On September 28th, it was announced that Gareth had been found guilty of murder in the first degree with the special circumstance of lying in wait. They were overwhelmed with relief. Amie's mom burst into tears. The man who had terrorized, abused, stalked, and killed her daughter had finally been held accountable. They were overcome with gratitude for the support that Amie received. Her dad, Tom, told all of her friends, "You're not just our friends, you're family. You really have become our family." They made sure they were in the courtroom every day, and they explained they never wanted Gareth to look over his shoulder and not see someone there for Amie, so her friends made sure to be there. But it still wasn't over. The monster had to be sentenced. Now, I don't always play victim impact statements, but wow, her mom's was very poetic. So I am going to play it.
I want to talk about hands and touch. Your hands were filled with hatred and vitriol. Your hands were focused on harm and causing pain. Your touch was to punish Amie for rejecting you. We all know what your hands accomplished. But I want you to know that your touch was not the last touch that Amie felt or remembered. Helping hands arrived after you ran away. Hands trained to offer aid and assistance. The LA Fire Department arrived and assessed Amie's condition. The ambulance crew arrived and transported Amie to the hospital. Their hands tended her. The doctors and nurses at the hospital tried to save Amie. Their hands, trained to prolong life, hands that took the oath to help and do no harm. Amie felt those interventions. She felt their touch. She never regained consciousness, but I am positive that she knew people were trying to help her. Her body registered their touch, their good intentions. They could not undo the harm that you inflicted. Then the medical examiner was using his hands and his touch to unlock the causes of her death. His hands, trained to unlock mysteries, trained to laboriously study her body, completed that task. The causes: blunt force trauma, strangulation. Amie was released to an elderly funeral home, and those hands of the undertaker prepared her for her journey home to the Philadelphia area. Caring hands. Our local undertaker met her flight and transported her home to Lansdale, Pennsylvania. Their caring hands dressed her. Amie's good friend Gabby called and asked if we would allow her to honor Amie by preparing her for the funeral, doing her makeup and her hair. "I know what she likes," Gabby said. "It was our honor, Gabby, to have you prepare her for her final public appearance." So Gabby's loving hands, hands trained to make people look good to enhance their natural beauty, prepped Amie. "I don't know how you did it, Gabby. Only love for a friend could have gotten you through." I know it wasn't easy. Loving hands, caring hands. And finally, Chris and Carrie and Tom and I were able to see Amie and touch her and tell her how much we loved her. After the funeral services ended, Tom and I attended to Amie. We pulled up the blanket in the coffin and tucked her in one last time. We kissed her and said goodbye. Our hands, loving hands, caring hands, were the last to touch her.
I cried when I heard that the first time, and I cried again when I was writing the script. It was so emotional to think of a mother having to lay her child to rest. The hands that touched her last were not his. They made sure of that. And that was really touching.
Her brother tried to speak, but he could hardly get the words out without breaking down in tears. He pointed out that Amie was not just a sister, but his friend and a source of inspiration in his life that's now gone. She won't be able to see all her dreams come true and live out her passion because of Gareth. And no one can ever quantify that.
Everyone who spoke had such profound things to say, and they were all so well spoken. Amie's friends, including Robert and Rudy, also read victim impact statements, as well as Grace Stanley, a very close friend of Amie's.
She was a rare breed, and her loss is felt every day. February 15th used to be my birthday. Now it's the anniversary of one of the worst days of mine and so many others' lives. I learned what it feels like to black out from grief that day. That's the day I lost one of my favorite people in the whole world. The kindest, most vibrant woman you'll ever meet died alone, scared and in pain. Your home is supposed to be your safe space. You hear stories about bad people breaking in and lying in wait, and it's every girl's worst nightmare. As a child, you're scared of the monsters hiding under your bed. But somehow, you grow up and convince yourself that these things will never happen to you or anyone you know. That is no longer the reality for so many of us. We install cameras and check the closets before going to bed. We have all been forced to look at our loved ones and ex-loved ones a little more closely. Our trust shattered. Because the boogeyman is real. And he's someone that I used to share laughs and late-night apple pie with. He had hours to change his mind while he waited in the dark for Amie to come home. He could have backed out at any moment, but he chose to carry out his sick plan.
And that was very powerful. She used to hang out with Gareth, so it's scary to think of what he became.
And she's right. He had hours to change his mind while he waited in the dark for Amie to come home. He could have backed out at any time.
Exactly. He chose this and went about his night like it never even happened. It takes a certain kind of person to do that.
Michael, Amie's former roommate, wanted to speak, but he physically couldn't. Instead, he wrote a statement, and the prosecutor read it to the court. It was clear his life had been forever changed. He suffered from debilitating PTSD, and he didn't just talk about the terror he felt while Gareth was out on bail. He also spoke about the crushing survivor's guilt he carries every single day.
There were people who did criticize him for not running to help her, running toward what was going on because they said she could have survived, that he could have scared Gareth away. He could have done more, but it's hard to know that. We don't know. But imagine the regret he must have felt. He said he was constantly plagued by replaying memories of that night in his head and wondering if there was something else he could have done to save her. It's not his fault. It's Gareth's. Gareth did this. The sophisticated level of deliberation and calculation Gareth used, Gareth chose not to address the court or Amie's loved ones. There was no choice but the court to impose life without parole as a punishment for something so monstrous. At the end of the day, Gareth didn't care about Amie or what she wanted. He didn't care about respecting her boundaries or about the consequences of his behavior. He only cared about himself, his anger, his selfishness, taking revenge, and then doing his best to cover it up.
Today, Gareth resides at Wasco State Prison in California. After Amie's death, her loved ones felt compelled to take action. They wanted to make sure that what happened to her never happened to another woman and to shine a light on the importance of her work, especially given the tragic irony of how she died. Through online petitions and the hashtag Justice for Amie, her community campaigned for major changes in California's law. Their biggest goal was to make restraining orders permanent, ensuring survivors would never have to testify near their abusers and requiring perpetrators to undergo mandatory, ongoing face-to-face counseling. They also pushed for a national registry, a disclosure scheme where the public could check if someone had a history of violent behavior. But this was back in 2020, and sadly, with the global pandemic that was taking over, the momentum behind Amie's case stalled before any real legislative reform could happen.
One person left a deeply personal comment on the online petition. It showed just how many people were affected by Amie's death, including those she had never even met. Around 2021, a woman posted, quote, "I feel guilty. It should have been me. I dated Gareth in late 2012. I had no idea of the restraining order. We dated for roughly 6 months, but we had hours between us. I was in San Diego and he was in Westlake. He wanted to relocate to San Diego and something just didn't feel right. So I slowly stopped responding to his messages. But maybe if I had stayed with him, Amie would still be alive today. She seemed like such a beautiful soul. I truly hope she gets justice and he's charged to the fullest extent," end quote. This next part is really, really important, and I hope that you can all help if you can. Amie's friends and family from both her personal life and her professional world came together to come up with an idea to honor her memory and her legacy in a permanent, meaningful way. They wanted to pay tribute to who she was as a professional, a friend, a daughter, and a community member, and the incredibly important work that she did that improved and empowered so many lives. A project is currently underway for a memorial statue of Amie to be built on a plot adjacent to the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. The plans, which are available to view on the memorial website, depict Amie as Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, with her beloved cat Marquis at her feet. But these things, of course, rely on donations. And Amie's loved ones have started a GoFundMe to help raise the money needed. I was actually really surprised that it was only at $11,000 when I made my donation, and they need to raise at least $175,000. I know that's a lot, but a lot of people watch our videos. And if we band together and we all make just a small donation, we can actually make this happen. So I hope we do. I'll be including all the links in the description box to the petition, her memorial website, and the GoFundMe if you can donate. And if you can't, please share.
Amie's loss left an irreplaceable void in the lives of everyone who knew and loved her, especially her parents, who now have to live every day without her brilliance, her laughter, and her incredible zest for life. She changed lives, helped heal emotional and psychological wounds, and was a powerful force for good in the world.
And if you or someone you know is experiencing a toxic relationship that includes stalking, harassment, or any of the other things we mentioned in this video, you can contact the National DV hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Thank you so very much for being here today for Amie's story. We will see you in our next one. Bye.